It is every police leader's responsibility to not only continually develop their own skills and abilities, but to prepare the next generation of leaders. Retired Captain William Frost helps you meet this task by providing a clear blueprint to follow in his book, Leadership in Law Enforcement. To learn more about his book and other consulting and training he provides, go to www.code33consulting.com. That's code33consulting.com.
Oftentimes, there's a lot of candidates that want to take the next step in the organization and promote. However, they find themselves at an impasse with where to start. Or they know where to start, but they know that there are so many different elements that are extremely arduous, challenging, and stressful to prepare for. I've prepared a guide because I want to help everyone, no matter what their confidence level is in public speaking or recognizing the different elements or how to show up your best way and highlight your leadership style. A lot of times those folks know exactly what it takes to be a leader because they do it at the line level. However, they are surpassed by those that simply test better, have the gift of the gab, whether or not they actually can put anything behind it, or they've taken the test so many times that they've slowly edged their way up that list and eventually may be in striking zone for a promotion. So if getting selected for the next rank is of interest to you, I highly recommend you do your homework and you recognize resources. And part of doing that homework and recognizing resources is the guide I've prepared. It hones in on a lot of my lessons learned from being on both sides of the table, testing as a sergeant. And although I got the nod in the first round, when I looked at the notes, there were a lot of things I misunderstood. There were a lot of things where I didn't present my best way. I was just fortunate that my total test score was I was fortunate that my total testing process was successful enough to get me in. And then for commander, doing that internal process and external process, seeing some dramatic differences, coming out on top of both processes. However, learning again, when I looked at the notes, there was so much that I left on the table or so much that I misrepresented myself or I didn't convey what I had intended to the assessor. So with all those lessons learned, breaking down the common test components, and also, arguably more importantly, how you identify, define, and prepare your own leadership philosophy that you can not only take into the test, but you can take into your day-to-day interactions with your team, your peers, your subordinates, and your leaders, right? Because leading up is a critical part of organizational development and culture as well. So for more on the guide, you can find it at bluegritwellness.com. That's the promotional guide at bluegritwellness.com/shop. And whether or not you are looking to promote, we all know those people that should be taking the next test that we keep nudging. And those people need to be empowered. They need to find confidence. And a lot of that can come from you just giving them that nod, giving them that support, that encouragement, and telling them where to find the guide.
That's it, man. You're either that leader or you are destroying that department. You got to decide who you're going to be.
Control what you can control, and we actually can control a lot of our perspective and outlook if we're intentional about it. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Blue Grit Radio. Today I'm joined by Dennis Pishock. I'm excited because he's a law enforcement officer. He's a DT instructor. He has that get after it-ness, but it wasn't always that way. And we're going to talk about his story as well. But it is one story that is all too common. His story is his own. But for people that they went to, I'll just call it the dark side, right? Things got pretty dark, pretty negative. He shares so much of that in his book, and we will get to that. But without further ado, Dennis, thank you so much for connecting and coming on the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here, and been following you for a couple of years now, so it's good to be live, as we say.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I gave a little teaser to the audience, but even before we started recording, I kind of talked about some of these things where we talk about wellness. It's in the name of my social where it started, but for some people, wellness is kind of it can mean so many different things. But what I really love about your approach is like there's nothing fluffy about it. It's like get the F after it, like work hard, work out hard, train hard. Yeah, and you just shared that you did some sprints this morning, which no joke. I have so much respect, and I love integrating sprints into just about any regimen that can handle it.
Yeah, man, absolutely. PT is part of the big two, as I call it, PT and meditation. Mind, body, and spirit. You have to have them all. Again, like they said, if you don't have one, you're in trouble. As far as PT, man, I got after it this morning. I am definitely, the colder it is, the harder it's raining, I'm always outside. I love getting after it, like you said. I saw you getting into the ice river the other day as well
Yeah,
after New
yeah.
Orleans. So, yeah, man, I'm all about that. And sometimes when we have those really, really bad calls, it's the only thing that will get you through it. There's no question. It's a reset, as I like to call it.
Yeah, man. It's been I mean, I've reflected so much about this, and for years I was one of the guys that people that needed a little encouragement or needed some direction, like, hey, how do I get started? From, I suppose, my fascination and my integration of physical training and my lifestyle, I'm so fortunate that I had at least those routines and those rituals for fitness before I encountered some of my hardest times in my career. I didn't have it all dialed in. I certainly had a lot of ground to gain and years therein and following and still, right? As far as like emotional balance and my social circles and wanting to lean in rather than draw away, which is all too common. I mean, we learn about that in textbooks, but I love how you even bring up that processing because, and after my shooting, and I had, my arms are wrapped up from second degree burns from a propane tank that ruptured. Like, I found myself going out like 2 a.m. and going to 24-hour fitness and running with my dog and, lifting, which was crazy that people were just staring at me with these two bandaged arms. But I was like, hey, I mean, I can move. And I almost had to. Is that what it's like for you?
Absolutely. I started off real young in high school, which for me is a long time ago, unlike you guys. But I had a couple of
Oh, no.
Japanese friends, and they started helping me to teach language. And back then, they kind of introduced me to a martial art. And we started getting into the Japanese martial arts side, and it's all about misogi, purification, very, very hard style, hardcore. And just like you said, one of the things we used to say was, well, I'm not going to sleep anyway, so I might as well get after it. Your
Yeah.
mind's racing, you're looking at the ceiling, and just like you said, might as well go do something. So let's be productive, and that's what we did. We get after it and start training and hit it hard.
Yeah. What kind of martial art was it?
We started back in the day. It was there's an old called Aikido back in the
Yeah.
day, probably
Mhm.
in mid 1980s, hard style, and then we got into karate, like Kempo, stuff like that, Okinawan Shorin-ryu, and just kind of expanded into there to finally Jiu-Jitsu, BJJ, and all that.
Yeah. I love it, man. Yeah, there is a too much, just like there's too much of anything. And for me, like reflections without going down the rabbit holes, like, yeah, the cortisol, right? And like loving to work out that way. And sometimes through the years, it's been learning and forcing myself to work out less intensely, right? And that I love where you brought up meditation. Can you tell us what that looks like for you? Because again, I really invite and encourage people to not shut down when they hear meditation. It may not be what you picture. There's so many different ways to approach it.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that up because in the beginning, growing up, we grew up up north outside Philadelphia and very Irish Catholic. So meditation was like the devil. Oh my God, you're meditating. It was that whole mystique. And
Yeah.
again, we started with the Japanese style. It was meditation in the cold water, but it was before any kind of Wim Hof or anything. It was getting underneath the waterfalls, doing that breathing to reset your body. And like you said, the cortisol, you felt great, but you didn't know why. You thought it was some mystic energy. Like, man, I feel incredible. And you maintain that. And definitely got into different types of meditation. I mentioned it in the book one point. There's some chanting. That's kind of like a Buddhist monk Shinto thing. And started with that and then just longer meditations and eventually found that Wim Hof method and box breathing and just saw how they correlated into our job profession, especially law enforcement when you're so hyped up, a shooting and all that, where your body overrides it and you've got to catch up. And a quick box breathe is, to me, the ultimate. It resets your system. And again, meditation is everything for what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fantastic, right? And I encourage people to think about it broadly. Like some people are like, oh, I can't sit still. It's like, okay, try like walking and like leaving your phone in your house. Like you're
Exactly.
gonna be with your thoughts. Don't it's not I think a nugget that I really like is it's not thinking about nothing. Oftentimes it's thinking about a specific thing, maybe a mantra. I even heard like just a nonsense word. So you're not thinking about all this stress in your life or just focus in on the one thing. Maybe it's the birds outside. So I love the different aspects like moving meditation. And I mean, you bring up the Irish Catholic background, East Coast dude, but even like for a lot of people, meditation is like ritual where you take pause and I mean, this is through the whole world when people pray and they take pause and they reflect, and like that is very much of the similar vein for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's like you said, just start small. It's incremental. Just take a walk. It's not even weight loss, like you said. Mother Nature is the great reset. You get out there and all of a sudden everything just disappears, and you're like, wow, this is pretty good. And you start hearing birds that you never heard before, and your mind kind of just resets itself, and that's all before PT, and that's that meditation, just getting your mind right, setting yourself up to be a better father, a better family member, and a better friend.
Yes, absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about, I talked about how things got rough for you, and people are absolutely invited to check out the book, and we'll give all the details at the end. But and I took a peek, and there's some hard stuff in there. And full disclosure, man, like I realize that I spend a lot of my time working on blue grit stuff, like outside of work hours and when the family's asleep and or hasn't gotten up yet, and it's heavy. And I found myself starting to, just like it can be, right? And I started to think about a lot of my work stuff, and it was evoking a lot because yeah, you've been there, you've been in the grind, and I appreciate how vulnerable you are and how willing you are to share that for the betterment of others so they can take your lessons. But reader discretion advised. It's you don't pull the punches in a good way.
Yeah, man. It's funny when I first started. It's like, and this my story is dark, and it's for the guys and girls. I call it the brotherhood, like I always say.
Yeah.
It's men and women. It's the same thing.
Hmm.
I just use that term brotherhood. And
Yeah.
anyway, when you work in the bad parts, and you can tell from your stories, it's the one percenters of all of us what we do, and it's dark, and you see so much dark. And I was trying to bridge that gap too, and eventually it eats you up. And to me, the book was therapy. And, I wrote it to help myself and maybe one other person, but we won't go too much into it. But yeah, man, it's dark. The kid calls, man, they're rough, and they were hard to write about it because, that's therapy, because you ignore it. We bury everything. We go to the next call. And when I started finally putting this stuff on paper, I was like, whew, man, this is some rough stuff, but made it through. And then I started getting messages from people, and like you said, the vulnerability. I just put it out there. Tired of hiding, and people are like, "Man, that was brave." I'm like, "What was brave?" And they're like, "Your story." I'm like, "Really?" Like, man, what you are, and your old Frank and all that. Finally, about when you start getting up to higher numbers, 30, 40 people reach out and say, "Hey, man, this book changed your life." You're like, "Damn, man, it's special, and it's an honor to be able to do that." And I'm just glad I got it out there to help some people. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Your book, Demons and Angels. And what was you talk about it being therapy and very therapeutic in processing and writing the book. What was the impetus to start that project?
So yeah, man, it's probably been in the process for about 2 years. I'm like, I got a lot of experience here, and again, we talked about this before, and I listened to all your stuff, and at some point, some guys mentioned too, you're almost embarrassed. You're kind of ashamed for some of the calls you've been on and the experience you're having, and you just got to embrace it, man. Somebody put you there, God, whoever, for a reason, and now you have that experience. So as you get older, we need to be sharing it with this generation. And finally, went to a peer support counselor. I do that for the state of Georgia, and they were like, some of you folks here are going to unlock the filing cabinet, as they said. I'm like, oh man, this chick's whacked. She don't know what she's talking about. Then I went to bed that night, and then all this stuff came flooding back that I had buried. And I'm like, man, was I on that call? And I started calling people. I'm like, hey man, did this happen? Because I blocked it out. Like, it's seriously blocked out. And they're like, yeah man, but do you remember this call? I'm like, no. And they said, how about this call? I'm like, hey dude, you were there. I'm like, no. And then the process began, man. I'm like, I got to start writing about this stuff because, again, we ran so many calls, and for the busy folks, they understand. You go call to call to call to call. Kid dies, go to the next call. Mom dies, go to the next call, and you don't have time to process any of it. And then you come in the next shift and you do it again. So all that stuff disappears, man. And that class, it got me going. So that's pretty much where the book came from. I started jotting it down, calling friends, and the book was written. Kind of the book wrote itself.
Yeah, I love that, man. And it makes me think about, you get a non-cop around, or non-cops asking you about like some of your stories, and sometimes it's a little much, right? And
Yes.
oftentimes it's fine, but I'm down to share. I'm a pretty open book, and sometimes I'm just at a loss. But you get around a couple cops, and then they're like, "Hey, remember that time when your dog?" And I'm like, No, tell me more. You know, it's like,
Right.
and
Exactly.
sometimes it probably is a little bit protective to not think about it all the time. Other times, and it might just be the sheer volume, right? You're just trying to get through and working in a busier place. Like you have a lot of these stories, but I love how you bring that up and how helpful it was for you. I think that, you know, oftentimes at different points in our lives or different points of our career, we may say, like, yeah, that's not for me. It's like, okay, maybe not yet. Right. And I think that that's kind of a nod to a more growth based and abundance based mindset is like, not yet. Like, maybe not that class. Maybe I'll go to another one, or maybe I'll bring a buddy and that will be more comfortable for me. Right. And maybe not that therapy, maybe this type of therapy. So, and even when I think about you sharing your stories, like, I think that there is so much value, and I didn't really do a good job at this. I didn't do a good job at this. I'll just say it. But a lot of cops, you know, when you start, they're like, "Hey, like take notes and like write down some of your really funny stories, some of your really good feelings, some of your hard times too." Because the power of journaling is something that I'm getting better at, as far as just reflecting back and putting something on paper and then leaving it there. Because I'm not immune to this, right? I still have the times where I'm like, man, like what, you know, how long am I going to do this job, and the stress, and is it worth it? Am I really making a difference at every single rank? However, when you go back, I think that if officers actually took some notes on some of the really validating, like positive calls, they could look back and be like, yeah, that's real, that was meaningful, and I still do stuff like that. I just need to remind myself, and it's just a nod to control what you can control, and we actually can control a lot of our perspective and outlook if we're intentional about it.
Absolutely. I agree. You talk about journalizing, huge too. And it's good to check yourself. Again, I like the path of, I want to say suffering, but the heavy PT. And, I always like to check myself, come back in a year or two and read what I wrote. And like, okay, where am I at now? Have I sacrificed my family or values? It's just a good way to check yourself, like you said. And one of your more recent podcasts, I can't remember, he talked about leadership. And leadership is in every role. You're correct. Patrol, you are such a leader. People are looking at you like that. And then as you move up, corporal, sergeant, whatever, you know, your agency has in rank, driver, engineers, and firemen, these are huge. And someone is always looking up to you. And once you're doing this 10, 15, 20 years, you're under that radar. People want to know what you're doing, what you're saying. And, you know, that's it, man. You're either that leader or you are destroying that department. You got to decide who you're going to be.
Yeah, yeah. It's that positive energy or that extremely corrosive energy that we all know all too well. And if we're honest with ourselves, I venture to guess that everyone has had a degree of it in themselves. Like I've been very toxic at certain times, even though it was sometimes from a place of trying to get something better or get us to a place that was better, whether it was my unit or whether it was my department. Like the energy that I was bringing, oftentimes with frustration, with cynicism, with resentment, like that was not moving the needle in any good way. And I was holding on to all that angst and it was having an effect for sure, like how I was interacting with people, home, everything.
Absolutely. And martial arts, Japanese style at least, they'll say positive key is positive key, negative key, negative key. Chinese call it chi. But it's positive, you know, it is. When you're positive, positive people come around you, right? Negativity draws that people in, and no matter what you do, like I said, oh, we didn't get this equipment. Command staff doesn't care about us, and it just takes over, man. And you have got to draw that line because it's okay at work, but once you bring that home, and I have a great wife, you know, your wife and kids, man, is that who you want to be known as? And that's so important, especially in law enforcement, where you see, and I put it in my book many times with the firemen, how many people don't even know their own children because they bring this job home
Mhm.
and that negativity, and they're like, here comes divorce two, here comes divorce three. Guess what? It's not them, it's you, and it's us bringing this stuff home and not fixing ourselves and saying, you know what? We're leaders at home too. You got to shut that off. But you're very
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, man, and I want to keep working on that idea because you know you brought it up before recording. You know the Goggins on F yourself, and you've been legit keeping it super clean. And I do not by any means require that. I just try not to. I try to abstain. You know when I'm recording on my show, but much respect, man. But yeah, whether it's negative energy, like just how do you it's just that importance to like handle yourself first, right? And recognize that whatever you bring is like a tangible thing you're bringing. Like there are studies that show that positive energy is contagious, and negative energy in a room, like they've tracked it, is contagious. Someone just walks in with that mood and everyone in the room just sinks, right? We've all been in that briefing room. And sometimes, honestly, it's probably us. And so we got to put the mirror up in front of us and reflect that back. But I think that there's so much, man, if there's one thing that we all really need, as I think as first responders, is to realize that we are going to control a lot of our own destiny. And no, we cannot control a lot externally, but we can control how we manage all that.
Yeah, you're so right. I went to another department about the last year. Great place, great little place, and they need that energy too. Every department you go to, you see it immediately. You see who the officers are and what we bring and that positive energy, man. You have to have that moment, like we talked about, and you will have that moment, or you're going to keep going down that negative path, man. And that, just like what you said, we have to lead, and it's got to be positive because we can't control everything. We can't control what they do, and once you can block that out, and people say they can, but man, once you just say, you know what, today I'm going to put bad people away. I'm going to stop cars. I'm going to do this. Everything just dissipates. It all disappears.
Yeah. What are things that you would say for those that are listening in, and the majority of the audience listening in is more of the positive, right? Like there's generally not going to be these super like anti everything people listening in and dedicating their time to us to share it with us. But for those that are positive minded, but they just find themselves, sometimes it's in the lunchroom, sometimes it's after a call or back at the station where they're like, man, like I want to be positive. I want to move in this direction, but everyone around me, it seems at times, is just so like sunk.
Yeah, that's a great. That's a great question, man. Your podcast definitely, which is awesome. It has brought people from all over the United States. That it's that common mindset of positive and people who want to make a difference. It's the go-getters, and they wouldn't be listening to you if not. They'd be like, "Oh, this guy's all fluff and all that." But you're not, man. That's a great thing. To me, ignore the noise, do the work. When you're quiet, if you're just quiet, they're like, hey, what's wrong with him? I'm not saying nothing, man, but I'm going to get out there on the streets and I'm probably going to get up out of this chair and get to work because I just don't want to hear it. I don't have time to hear it. Nobody does. We are only granted, as we see all the time, a little bit of time on this planet, and you better enjoy it because we see it over in a flash of a second. So the older you get, man, I just think you get it more, and the more experience you get in this profession and the more deaths you see, you just get it. We sit on scenes with family members for hours waiting for that coroner, and you're trying to talk to these people, and it's so uncomfortable. As you know, you're like, I have nothing left to say, But you go home, and that better check you, man. That better check you and say, tomorrow can be better. And people get it, man. When they see you doing it, just get up there, ignore the noise, do the work.
Yeah. Yeah, it should check you, and sometimes it doesn't, right? Because it's legit stress, it's legit trauma, it's secondary, sometimes primary exposure, but it does require like that agency, like that personal agency to be like, cool, I'm gonna do me. I'm gonna sit here. When you said that, my daughter just started kindergarten, so it makes me think about all these rules you learn as like a little kid, like, oh, you have nothing nice to say, say nothing at all, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I even brought this booklet and I put it on my bulletin board and at work, but it was just kind of like, say kind things and like keep your hands to yourself. I was like, and then my joke was like, yeah, we just did this here in the PD. And I'm not talking about out in the community. I'm saying like a lot of times we're so mean to each other, and there's a friendly kind of camaraderie at times, but we all know when it goes and there's that bite, there's that extra bite in it where it's actually like, I'm not fully joking. You are actually, you're a slug, or
yes,
you're in my business, or what have you. And so, yeah, the personal nod starts with you. I've often loved the advice of like, there's generally one person, right? One guy or gal that is either moldable and approachable, or is of the same volition. Like, and then you try to surround yourself with those people and like, hey, let's go do this. Hey, let's go patrol this area. And then I like to think that will model. I've seen it so many times in different teams where that positivity just all that's needed just to tip the scale and start that domino effect a little bit.
Yeah, people, it's what you mentioned earlier too. You have to accept some stuff just is what it is. You're going to get that officer who's going to hide at the gas station. You cannot change that officer. Get over it, right? It's what they do. You just keep doing your job and again, let it go, man. But some people you just cannot change. But people who are kind of in that gray area, they're going to come to you as well. You have to be that positive role model. You have to. If you're that negative one, guess what? They're coming to you too, because they're on the fence right now. They're not sure if they want to do this career. I don't know if this is for me. I got a couple years in. man, what we do, and as we get older, we have got to be that difference maker. So that neutral gray person, he's coming to our side. He's like, you know what? This agency ain't so bad, man, because we're having a lot of fun today. It was a great day, and let's do it again tomorrow. And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I reflected on this career a lot, and it changes all of us. But
Yes.
I've made the comparison before. You think of like Lord of the Rings, where Frodo's all like, he's basically corrupted, right, by the ring, and he's the shell. He's all like pale and like kind of, he's a shell of what he used to be. He doesn't have that vibrancy, and he has to go like live off with the elves in some like weird undying island. Like, but like it doesn't have to be that way, right? Like we have our scars, literally, physically, and emotionally and mentally, but that doesn't have to be crippling, right? And we have a lot of choice. And I'm not trying to compare apples to oranges, different people and different experiences. What I am trying to say is that there is that degree of acceptance that there is always something that we can do to improve that situation and seek and accept resource, seek and accept community in that.
Yeah, get out of your own head too. Fire department has a big advantage over us where you have an engine crew or something like that where you guys are all together and you can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Police tend to sink into themselves. I'm going to get my patrol car and drive off and go watch Netflix. No, man. Hey, bro, get the hell out of there. Come to lunch. Come join us at lunch, and all of a sudden go have a cup of coffee with your buddy. And, man, that's where you build, as you know, those great squads, those great teams. And law enforcement, they don't last long because someone went to CID, someone goes to traffic, and it's over, man. But once you get those squads, man, like you talked about writing it down, those are the special moments, and that's when you smile, and that's when everything is just good in the world right there.
Yeah, that's such a thing, like just by design, right? You are in the firehouse together, you're breaking bread, you sleep, you do your work together, you train together. It's so much more frequent. It's built in where you have these pretty organic opportunities for peer support or for that kind of decompression, that diffusing, right? We call it in CISM type of stuff. Whereas police, you really have to be intentional. Like being peer support coordinator, like it was so hard to try to set up debriefs or even some moderate diffusings because everyone's so busy. And I recognize I toggled between, man, okay, was that big of a call, and let's offer, but then people want to show up, but they're already working 12s, at the time, and then you're asking them to come in because we don't have the staffing. So you offer overtime. As bosses, that's cool. As management, that's cool. But then you're taken away from their limited home life. And so such a struggle that I love the idea of diffusing or rolling it in with your normal briefing or roll call. Or it makes me think about working nights back when, where sometimes everyone was typing a message out saying, hey, let's go to 132 and 240, and it was like that 7-Eleven where Raj was working. He was a cool dude, Raj. But we would all get like a cup of kind of crappy coffee, and there are definitely times where I did not want to be a part of it, but I didn't want to let the guys down. Like I wanted to be a part of them, and I never regretted it, right? Like there's times where I wanted to kind of do my own thing, kind of in a mood, but getting together and standing out in a cold parking lot with a cup of coffee, like just communing, right? That's what community is built around, like the same word, the same notion. So yeah, it just reminds me of that and how important that is to force yourself and grab your buddy. Peer pressure goes a long way in a positive
Yes,
way sometimes.
absolutely, man. And you nailed it there. And I didn't know you're a peer support coordinator, so that's awesome too. Really cool. And it is so hard. And again, I always bring that fireside experience to the police side. Fireside, it was mandatory. And again, you get a lot more bad calls because you might be on an ambulance. We don't have that side. So when you get those child calls, it was kind of mandatory, and everyone got together. It didn't matter what, but people talked, and you have to have it. You got to have that talk because you bring it home. We've already seen what happens. And the police, it is so difficult, like you said, because there's always a staffing problem. Someone's on admin leave. Someone's in somewhere, PTO training. You know how it is. And it's so difficult. But my bottom line is we have to do a better job. Our suicides are still through the roof. We talked about, again, offline before with the various ones at New York. And man, we can all do better, and we have to do better. So I'm not sure what the answer is, but until I drop dead, I'm going to figure it out. And that's how I look at it.
Yeah, it's not one thing is what I wager. It's the combination of things. It's a little bit of everything we talked about, right? It's encouraging and pushing and this initiative to take care of your body, like take your training seriously. And that leads right back to purpose. So it's not just wellness for the sake of wellness, but whether you're a first responder or you're a dad or a mom or a cousin or just like a community member, like
you have some personal agency to take care of yourself, and you can help more people when you do that, even if all your work's online, even if all of it's on Zoom, whatever the thing is. And ultimately, I mean, like I know where you're at with this, but I've talked about being a protector, and I'm not trying to act like I'm some hard thing, but I recognize like I look at the world differently since being a cop, since being a husband, since being a dad, where it just like continues to evolve, and I have to take a lot of ownership of that, and I want to contribute to that positively. There's also taking care of your mental health, right? And then we talked about peer support. We talked about the unofficial peer support, which is like, hey, let's get together, let's build some camaraderie. I think it's a combination of all those things, man.
Yeah, I totally agree. You nailed a lot of points there, so I'm not even sure which to hit first. It's just shoot. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to start right
Yeah,
there?
yeah. Well, one thing I do want to ask you, and I'd be remiss if I forgot, is like walk me through, and I don't know if it's every day, but kind of walk me through like your process and your ritual. And I want to preface it by some people that are, we're recording just after New Year's. I'm not sure this will probably air in the early part of the year, but people sometimes get intimidated by these really extreme, regimens. We're talking about, cold exposure. We're talking about working out hard, like, intervals and all this in the rain. But yeah, just walk us through that, and people can kind of take little notes for themselves, or be like, yeah, I do those things and I want to do more.
Absolutely, man. I'm all about breaking it down, breaking myself down, breaking others down. So you can say, hey, I'm going to lose 10 pounds. Well, how are you going to do it? Well, I don't know. Well, that's not a plan, man. Here's how we're going to do it incrementally. So you start small. So I break everything down into on duty, off duty. So, I get up, try to get as much sleep as I can. Sleep much better now, which is great. Probably has not to do with my mindset. But on duty, if you want to start small, walk. Me and my squad, we get 2, 3 guys. Hey, man, we're meeting at the park. Just walk laps. And we would just, shoot the and just have a
Yeah.
good time and just
Shoot the
enjoy it.
breeze. That's
And
what you meant, right? Yeah.
yeah, man, exactly. A jungle gym. I know you talked about this before. I'm all about pull-ups, man, and that's in 30 pounds of gear, and I get it done. Just knock out sets of whatever you can do. If you can hang, that's perfect. You're
Yeah.
eventually going to get there, man. Start there. And one thing I like to do, like I even did it yesterday, man, I find a high school, and this is for my 1%ers. I do bear crawls up and down, push-ups up and down those bleachers for as long as I can
Oh
till
my,
my next
yeah.
call.
Rip
Oh,
my
man, I
total
love it.
shirt. Yeah. I love it though. I
So
love it.
that's for the guys who really want to get after it, right? But man, steps 1 and 2 on duty. Before I start my shift, 10 to 20 draws with my gun every day to just mindset. Mindset is everything, right? You have to have that mindset. You've been in a shooting as well, so you understand today's the day. It's not paranoia. It's today's the day. And I got my draws. I know I'm smooth. I'm ready to rock and roll. I forget about it. And that's how I start my on duty gig right there.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, today's the day, and often we talk about paranoia, or we can shift it into preparedness, right? And that confidence, and that's where we want to be. How about off duty, man?
Off duty, man, this is where we take it to another level for sure. So I have a garage gym. So I ran my own martial arts school for 17 years, combatives, martial arts, all that. If you got that, I have all the garage gym stuff. What I like to say is, if you don't have to drive, you got all drive. Man, once you eliminate that gym and you can just walk outside in your garage and you got everything, oh man, you can just crush a workout in 30 to 45 minutes, whatever you do. You're not having to worry about 10, 15 minutes in traffic, all that, looking at your phone. You put on the music, man, whatever, you crank your tunes and you get after it, man. It's time to let's go. Number 2, I say martial arts, whatever it is, doesn't matter. I don't care. BJJ, I like jiu-jitsu, aikido, doesn't matter. Karate, just do something. It's all about the mindset. Yet again, it comes down to confidence, and it's not hypervigilance. It's just a confidence going into calls. SPEAR, I mentioned that before. Tony Blauer, he does a huge thing on no fear, and it just helps fix your things. Because that's what I tell people. Guess what, man? We're scared shitless sometimes too on calls, man. But we got to get it done. And he really addresses that. And once you can finally fix yourself, saying it's okay to be afraid. It's okay. There's no courage without this fear and bravery. So that's how we get into it. But again, man, those are just some things. If you're just looking to beat yourself down, a Go Ruck is a horrible event. I highly recommend them. The Special Forces guys will beat you down. But again, it's a mindset, and you start learning what the body can do that you didn't push yourself to, that, you hang out with those good friends and stuff who push you to do things that you would never, ever do. Those are just some examples of what can assist us in our jobs.
Yeah, I love it. I love it how you scale it where it's even like, hey, just go walk around and just hang with your gear. Like grip strength. There's so many correlations to grip strength and overall health. Shoot, you could do the maybe you can manage a couple pull-ups, but not in gear. It's like, okay, cool, do the step up or jump up, watch your face, and then hold it, right? And then slow lower, like work those eccentrics as we call them, those negatives. Those are fantastic too. So I love how you talk about kind of removing the drive adds drive. Is how did you put it again?
Yeah, it's no drive means all drive. That's what I say, man. Right there.
Yep. And there's so much benefit to that. I think that there is a lot of kind of that environment stuff. Some people love the gym environment because it's more motivating to have other people around. But I love the lowering of the fruit, the hanging fruit. So recognize that with shift work, and this is something I always encourage people to think about. It's like there's always stuff you can do in your home, right? You don't need equipment. There push-ups. There's like a million types of push-up varieties that would make you absolutely sweat and tremble, right? But at the same time, walking's free, sprinting's free, running up a hill, jogging up a hill is free, carrying, throwing some weight in a pack, front carry, back carry, like depending on what suits your back, that's free 99. So come and get it. So I love that,
Come
man.
again. Yeah, man. And it's as we get older too. It's about being smart. And again, you can kick it up to super notches once you figure it out. It's not being lazy or being, oh, I don't work out like I did when I was 30. I work out harder now. I've just figured it out in my body, like eating well, lots of protein. You figure out what works for you and you have at it. But you also need that, you got to change things up because you don't want to be predictable as well because your body figures that out real quick too, like you said. So you go find a mountain man, carry a medicine ball up it. We have some mountains near here, and next time, you don't carry that or whatever. You figure out this doesn't feel too good. Well, man, don't compare yourself to others. I always say that. Do what works for you, man, and just have at it and have fun. And just go there.
Yep, it's the thief of joy, as they say. And I don't regret things. I like to look at my life with no regrets. But if I'm honest with myself, some of my get after it, the most I was getting after it was trying to max like a deadlift and all these things. And I was working canine, and oftentimes I'd be running a track, and my back was killing me. Like why I put so much sheer force, and I wasn't competing. So like already to max out as often as I was trying to do that was not paying into my overall wellness, my longevity. Like I'll say training smarter, being, 10 years senior now or more. Yeah, I don't do a lot of deadlifts or definitely not heavy ones. I do a ton of pull-ups. I do a ton of rows, right? And I feel more able to just if I had to run a couple miles right now, I'd be way more able than back then, which was not definitely not the goal, but hey, you learn, you live and learn. And luckily I didn't, cripple myself or something like that. But for those of our personalities, I feel like a lot of first responders, it's like all go. So once you build up that motivation and that motor's revving, yeah, like it's hard to back off, even if there's these other mechanisms, i.e., physical pain. I want to see your thoughts on this. I like to suggest myself and others, hey, discomfort's totally good. That's actually we want to be uncomfortable. Pain is not. Don't just ignore pain.
Absolutely. I talk about the garage gym, so have some guys who come over, all civilians, and we just get after it, man. And you push each other, and there is no pain, right? Everyone knows when you're in that pain, but when you're harassing each other with the peer support, hey man, that's all you're gonna do? Is that a push-up? Guess what, man? They start putting out more right there, and it has nothing to do with pain. They just realize I'm not putting out right now, man. It's
Yeah,
good that you
yeah,
got to have that person next to you always saying, "Hey, bro, that's it, really?" Because my kid can do more than you, man, and it's just one of those things. But no, pain. Public safety will humble you real fast. I tell everyone that. It will punch you in the mouth whenever you get arrogant. I found it when I first started the fire department a long time ago. I was a great runner, pretty good shape, but we started getting on fires and pulling hose. I had no ass to pull that fire. I mean, the hose. I'm like, man, this hose is heavy. Where's all my cardio and everything? Gone because you didn't have that job application training, and I had no one to teach me at that time. And there's always people smarter than you, as you know, and you find those people and you start figuring out how to train for the job. And that's what to me it's all about right now, effective training. All of a sudden running 6 to 10 miles was absolutely useless. And you figure
mhm,
that out, man. And this job
yeah,
will teach you that it's not pain. It's just, again, what I just said.
yeah. I love that. Yeah, and I glossed over that. And yeah, if people haven't picked it up, we got the super responder. We got police and fire. He's like this first and second responder here. So love it, man. So I want to kind of bring things back together. We covered a lot of ground in this fantastic crash course, but defensive tactics, physical training, mental training, right? Meditation and strengthening your mind, peer support, all these different mechanisms. What would you really want the listeners, whether they are the applicant, the recruit, mid-career, or they're actually recently retired, like what are the things that you really want to leave people with?
That's a great point. Purpose. What is your legacy going to be? That disturbs people. And I'll hit on first. So the retiree, because I'm getting close to that, and I have buddies, and unfortunately, I don't know if you saw Charleston Fire. I think they just had a bunch of firemen. I think 3 of them just commit suicide. And you have to know that you made a difference and that you were awesome. And these guys need to hear it too, because once you retire, as you know, man, it disappears, right? This career is so harsh, but again, it's what you talked about. We're so busy. Everyone is so busy that that guy who retired, we don't have time to reach out as much, and that's a problem too. But just knowing that the retiree made a difference every day in police work, what we do is it's unbelievable. People can't comprehend it, and I try to bridge that gap every single day in the United States what a police officer does. So when I put my head down at night, man, I know I made a difference. No matter who it is, I made, a kid, somebody, when you bring someone to tears, holy crap, man, that's an awesome thing and very humbling. And that's what this profession does. So that's where I'd like to bring it to the recruit. First of all, we discussed that with them, right? You're going to meet some great people, but I also like to tell them the dark stuff too. Like let's not protect these kids because they haven't dealt with what we've dealt with, and they didn't have childhoods growing up like we did, where you got in physical fights, you did all this stuff. Hey, man, you're going hands on. Okay, just get this through your head right now. Like, you're not going to talk yourself through some situations. But then you get to the positive. You're going to meet some of the greatest civilians that are going to blow your mind. When you're at your lowest low and you get a cup of coffee from somebody, you're like, holy shit, man, this cup of coffee, like I said, it was junk, but it tastes freaking phenomenal, man. And these moments of pure bliss, man, this career, you'll see. They will see. Again, you're going to make a difference every day, and you're going to be at some lows. But just know at the end of it, if you put the work in, you're going to be highs that people can't comprehend, a normal person.
Yeah, I love that. It's always purpose. Like there has to be a reason for this. That's where I encourage people to write down their why when they're prepping. Like obviously you get good at it when you're interviewing, explaining and articulating your why. Why do you want to do this thing? Like why is this the thing to help people? Because there's countless ways to help people that aren't this career. Why this? And revisit that. Like periodically revisit that. Maybe if you're so inclined right now, if you're not driving, like pull out your phone, put just some random date in, maybe today, and then schedule it every year or every month, even better. Like, what is your why? And like, force yourself to kind of look back at some notes. And I have to intentionally do that. Like, I have to intentionally talk about like, what is my why at work? What is my why, at a desk at work most of the time? What is my why here on Blue Grit? Like, what am I doing for all these hours and hours? And when I'm honest with myself, like I'm reminded and I see the validation, because we can be so hard on ourselves. So please do that, people listening.
Yeah, man. And you just said it. Every person has their own why, their own legacy. But what you just said, again, if you beat yourself up, and that's what we do in this profession. Like, we're A-type personalities. We're always trying to do better, 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 and be harder. You're bringing people from all over the United States and maybe bigger together in this common platform. And man, whenever you're feeling the demons, like I call it, man, you need to check yourself and say, hey, man, I'm doing something good here, because I would have never heard about you. How many people have you said the same thing? And you're bringing all this positive energy and this good stuff together, man, and it's slowly making that ripple and that wave, and a good thing, man. And so we appreciate what you're doing yet again, man. Thank you.
Thank you, man. No, thank you for being part of that team, right? It's guests like yourself, it's other first responders that you're on over time zones away, and we're fighting the same fight, right? It's one team, fire, police, community, whatever, right? Like we have one purpose, and that's making a safer society, right? And so let's focus on the big rocks, and then we can worry about the minutia later. But no, I highly appreciate you, man. I appreciate you coming on, Dennis, and sharing in this time and space, and also the listeners, of course, right? It's a team. Like people listening makes it so much more impactful. But I would get so much benefit even if it was just me and you shooting the breeze. I know that there are many people that listen in and will share this, but Dennis, could you please close with where people can find you, where they can find your book?
Sure, man. The book is Demons and Angels. You can find it on Amazon. It's in Again, you get hardback, softback, whatever it is, ebook. As far as the website, it's www.pishockbooks.com. My email is dpdemonsanangels@gmail.com. LinkedIn is my name, Dennis Pishock, and Instagram is Pishock_Patriots. Reach out, man. Again, where I'm at in my stage of life, I'm all about giving back and helping others, peer support, and keeping our brothers and sisters alive and keep making a difference every day in this job. That's my purpose right now.
I love it. Thanks again, and listeners can check the show notes for all those links.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man.
All right, I'm really excited to share with you the new Blue Grit Police Testing and Hiring Guide that's live on the website. Really, this is the culmination of everything I've learned about police testing from the time I came in myself and had to figure out trial by fire what it was that agencies wanted, at the same time how to showcase my best version of myself, right? It's not about being something that you're not, but it's about understanding each stage in the game so you can present the best way. In my guide, I go in everything about the hiring landscape right now, how to develop your mindset, what to expect, and how to show up. So it's about knowing yourself well, like identifying strengths, weaknesses, how to conceptualize this, how to articulate this, and then going into the test itself. So written, physical components, interviews, everything that we're looking for there, the background, what that entails, polygraph, psych eval, medical, what these things all are, what they're trying to yield or determine, and then how you can make sure that you are showing up to be effective so you're not wasting your time, stress, money, all the angst of waiting for this extremely long-term process to go through. So just show up the right way, your best way the first time. Again, you can find that at bluegritwellness.com. Go to the shop, so it's bluegritwellness.com/shop. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.